Are you an entrepreneur who has a frazzled state of mind? Do you need help managing your stress learning curve? Managing the stress involved with a new idea and the knowledge and skills necessary to see it come to fruition. Well, according to a study entitled The Psychological Price of Entrepreneurship, conducted by Inc. magazine, it found that 45% of entrepreneurs admit to being stressed out, 3% higher than other workers. Erin Riley is an integrative coach for creatives and entrepreneurs. She works with creative people who are building their businesses, launching a new program or service, or mapping out their new visions to create clarity and direction in their business. She joined me this week to have a conversation about business clarity, direction, creating an inclusive environment, and how to achieve and sustain viable versatility and longevity. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. I'll welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to learn all about your journey in business and helping people achieve their visions. Great to see you this afternoon, and thank you so very much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, Aaron, I know the catalyst of what to do is help people launch their businesses and programs in order for them to sort of take the next step in business. So I'd love for you to tell me all about the great work that you do.
Yeah, so essentially, I work with creatives of all types. And honestly, I think we are all creators. We're not born artists. We learn how to express ourselves. So I work with innovators, entrepreneurs. This can look like authors, comedians, artists, traditional artists, or even coaches, but just essentially very visionary people that have lots of ideas and they want to achieve their vision, whether that's like writing a book or launching a new service or a program, but they don't know exactly how to do it, especially in a way that doesn't leave them really frazzled or burned out.
Yeah, and let's dive into that creating your vision. I'm wondering your thoughts on how we really dive in to create a concrete vision that is sustainable in business.
Yeah. So again, going back to that like frazzled and burned out stage, a lot of people that try to create something, they feel a lot of pressure to do it. Their knowledge or their skill is not very high in how to do it. And so they get in this stage of just feeling strained or burnt out, and that's not sustainable. You can only stay in that place for a certain amount of time. Otherwise, you're going to start creating chronic stress, which can lead to all kinds of things. It can affect you psychologically, it will affect your body. So essentially, when you're creating anything, whether it's a new business, a piece of art, or any kind of endeavor, there's two things that you have to remember. Like I said, the pressure involved and also the skills and the knowledge it takes to create those things. This is called the stress learning curve or the Yerkes-Dodson law. And so if your pressure is really high to create this thing, maybe you only have a period of time before your savings runs out or you don't have funding or something like that, and your skills or your knowledge is really low, you're gonna be in this strain and burnout side all the time. And so this is people waffle here a lot, and this is why people tend to stop pursuing creative things or they stop pursuing their business, you know. So those are the main things to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we look at the end of this month, it's the end of Women's History Month, and women have certainly come a long way when it comes to entrepreneurship and staking their place in business. So I'm wondering your thoughts on the significance of observing the month and what it means to you.
Yeah, I think this is a great topic, and I'm so glad that you put this in here because it speaks to me and it speaks to a lot of people I work with. When we think about entrepreneur women right now, we think about like Kylie and Oprah, and we're seeing all of these stars that already have this foundation and they're creating these like huge product lines and all of this. But I want to go back to how it all began. It's only been till 1989. Before that, women had to have a male co-sign to get funding for their business loan. That's not that long ago. And so now we jump to forward now how much progress women have made. Statistics say that women-owned businesses now represent more than 40% of all business, and 89% of them are women of color, which is incredible. However, there's still a massive issue with funding for women of color, for women. And I just love seeing the tenacity and the resourcefulness that they are showing the world that they can do things with less support than compared to men, right? So yeah, there are changes that are happening, and I love that we're able to talk about this, but there still is progress to be made. So yeah.
Yeah, well, let's talk a minute about that progress. What do you think still needs to be done in terms of breaking down barriers to entry to business for women? I'm curious to get your perspective on the matter.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just access to education. There's so many people who are wildly innovative, have tons of ideas, but it's the whole thing and the whole problem is how do you actually get that into a sustainable business? Not something that just, you make a lot of money really fast and then all of a sudden it's over, but something that you can really create a like good sustainable life around. So I think the biggest thing is just education, and we need to have more access to understanding what organizations are out there to help with funding, what the process of building out a business looks like, what are the building blocks. And that's a lot of what I do as my work as a coach is I give people the actual tools, tutorials, and things like that. So I work around the business, but I also work around like the mental blocks as well, because we carry a lot of baggage with us, people in general, not just creatives, and we have to address those things that are blocking us mentally from moving forward and creating things. So yeah, work like that is what I would say.
Yeah, and in terms of the work that you do, you mentioned it in your last answer, eliminating those mental blocks and really meeting people where they are in their own individual businesses. So I'm wondering your thoughts on the whole helping people really understand where their places in business and really honing in on their vision, the way that they want to be represented in business. So I'm curious if we can dive into the work that you do in that regard.
Yeah, well, the main bit around my work, the foundation, is just that every person is different. I do not subscribe to a one size fits all because we are all different. You think about basic things like even like the Myers-Briggs personality test, like the ENFJ, IFSP, stuff like that. It shows that every single person is different. So why do we expect business building to be created the same way? So of course, there is a framework to creating a business. There's things you have to address. But since every person is unique, you have to consider all different aspects of their life, their past, their strengths, their weaknesses, things like that, just kind of like you said. So doing a lot of assessments and awareness around what comes easily and what doesn't, and what may you need help or outsourcing with. because you need the whole picture to know how to build a business. It's kind of like if you don't have the whole picture, you're building this like gorgeous house on like shifting sand in a desert. And it's like, well, how's that going to work? That's just going to fall down then. So that's kind of what my work is around integrative coaching, seeing the whole picture and making it work for you as a unique individual.
Yeah, and Aaron, I wanted to follow up and ask you about empowerment in business and crafting your own pathway to success. You have a lot of experience in helping people take sort of ownership of their own business. So talk to me about your perspective on empowerment in business.
Yeah, well, I think my passion for empowering people in their business comes from my background. I spent 15 years of my life, I'm in my mid 30s, but I spent 15 years of my life being the right hand person of these wildly creative entrepreneurs and watching them try to craft their own path, try to do things their own way, but they were so unaware of what they needed and what worked that they would just burn out. They'd burn bridges, they'd burn friendships and families. They had no life other than their business. So, really, how I define and why I emphasize why it's so important to create your own path and how that's so empowering is again that nobody is the same. Everybody is going to have more success in one certain type of marketing strategy than the other because of what their natural skill set is. Some people are super risk tolerant, meaning that risk doesn't bother them at all. And then some people, they can't do that. They need to have a map. They need to understand what's ahead of them. So doing a lot of things like this, also understanding like how to set up your own schedule. If you're your own boss, like, do you work 9 to 5? Do you work, when do you take time off? Like, what is my creative flow? Do I get really productive at 10 p.m. and I need to work then? So things like that, you have to really project ahead and kind of create the path ahead of you instead of just reacting to everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Aaron, I'm going to share a little bit about myself. I was born with what's called spastic quadriplegia of cerebral palsy. Simply means that I don't have an oxygen in my legs to walk normally. And outside of hosting this podcast, I do a lot of work in helping individuals with disabilities find and maintain employment. And I think entrepreneurship is an emerging field for folks with disabilities. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on the whole notion of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm so grateful that you are here to help people understand and like educate on that. This entrepreneurship is a wonderful place for people to craft their own path to figure out what works for them. Every body, every brain is different. I work with a lot of people that, say that they have neurodivergent brains. A lot of people that have really intense ADHD. A lot of creative people do suffer with that. And I think there's just, thankfully now, it's people are open and they understand, and there's more education out there that there are non-normative ways of doing things, and that there's this big piece around that, but also around accepting what we are, how we work, and then like loving it and then building our work around it. And so I do a lot of work here identifying like how you work best, addressing and healing like the negative feelings that may have been piled on from like society or from even yourself, and figuring out a way to do things that work for you uniquely.
Yeah, and just a quick follow-up in that regard. I'm also fascinated to ask you about the emergence of technology in business and the role that you think that that's held in terms of advancing forward business propositions and opportunities in general.
Well, I think that the internet is a really incredible thing. Sometimes we hate it, sometimes we love it, but I think for creating your own business, it is wildly accessible to do that now. We have, virtual courses, virtual conferences. We are able to do podcasting from Canada to New Mexico. There's so much out there that's available. And a lot of stuff that's free. That's the other thing, like finding people that can just give out resources that can connect you to a podcast episode like this. I personally am really grateful for technology. I do all of my client work completely virtual using online whiteboards and having client portals where I just pour in resources for them and tutorials. So personally, I'm grateful for technology, and I think it makes it much more accessible to people to start their own business.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the, you had brought it up in the last answer you gave was the advantage of podcasting and the way it helps business people reach a wider audience. I wanted to dive in more specifically on the benefits you think podcasting offers business people.
Yeah, great point. I love this. I think podcasting is an incredible way to educate yourself, and it's so easy. You can go on a walk and listen to podcasts. You can exercise, you can, cook dinner or whatever, and listen and educate yourself. There's so much that's out there. I actually am a co-host of a podcast myself called the I'm Excited Show, where I co-host with a marketing expert for people that are trying to enter into creative entrepreneurship. So answering a lot of questions, very basic things like, how do I get funding? Do I have to create my business through my own savings? Things like that. And not using jargon. That's another thing I love about podcasts is that they feel very real. They're good, real conversations that you can feel connected to. So it's honestly one of my favorite forms of education.
Yeah, and in terms of direction and clarity, which I know you help your clients with, when it comes to business and personal life, if you have direction and clarity as an entrepreneur, I strongly feel that it positively affects the other aspect of your life. And I was wondering your thoughts on the aspects of that as well.
Yeah. So I have done hours and hours and hours of interviews of entrepreneurs and creative people all over the world. And the common theme that I have found is that people that are creative or they're innovative, they want to create something, they have a lot of ideas swimming in their head. That's a good thing. And it can be a challenging thing, right? So the challenging thing is when you have too many ideas in your head, you're very creative or visionary, this can create a lack of focus, inability to manage your time, not knowing how to manage your time, some frantic feelings, that lack of clarity, fuzziness. And there are many things you can do to get clarity and strong direction. But I really think one of the best things to do is to get all of the ideas out of your head and to categorize and make some kind of plan, or I call it a roadmap. You can't really know where you're going if you don't have an idea of what's ahead. It's kind of likening it to being in the wilderness somewhere. You're trying to get to water. Obviously, you can do it without a map or survival skills, but it's going to be exhausting and frustrating doing it. A map's going to help soothe your nerves when you're lost, because you're going to be if you're an entrepreneur, you're going to have times of feeling lost, right?
Well, it's a different world being an entrepreneur, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And when I say entrepreneur too, I don't mean these huge tech startups. I mean, if you are creating a business, whether it fully, funds your life financially or not, that is an entrepreneurial endeavor. That is a small business that happens. So I just want to clarify that by what I mean by entrepreneurs, just something like that.
Yeah, and I had one follow-up as it relates to mental clarity in business. What are your thoughts also on the notion of having to take a mental break from your business? I know that you live in Austin, Texas, but you take these mini adventures when you're away from Texas, and the importance of sort of taking a mental break and finding your sense of adventure too.
Yeah. Well, I think I this is what I usually explain productivity like. And what I mean by productivity is you have these moments of clarity where you can execute your ideas and you feel like you're on top of the world. It's kind of like a wave. A wave has this down part before it has this crest and the wave falls. You need to have that break, that mental break, just like you said, right? That's why the whole ideas of like having weekends happens. But if you are an entrepreneur, a lot of times you sacrifice your weekends to make something happen. But I think it's absolutely essential to have breaks, whether it is just weekends or you're even taking a chunk of time off. You plan ahead and take maybe even a sabbatical, which is a lot of what I do as I design sabbaticals with people and coach them while they're on the sabbatical so they can have rest, they can refocus, and then they can redesign what's not working in their life and their business to come back and implement it. And a lot of people that are self-employed don't give themselves permission to do this because they think, oh my gosh, how I can't afford to not have, 2 weeks or a month of work. But I think it's really important, and especially for people that are constantly producing, whether it's like content or podcasts or new services or comedians that need to write content all the time. Having that break, that mental pause is really important to productivity.
Yeah, and I think if you do it right, you can create more flexibility to do the things you want to do, right?
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah. And tell me, outside of work, I'm curious, how do you sort of find your own personal inner center? What do you like to do for fun when you're not working?
Yeah, that's a great question. I aim really hard to enjoy my work, but to also have it be balanced. So, I love being in nature. I am a big outdoors person. So whether that's, going sailing or just walking or hiking or anything like that. I just love anything that involves nature. But I love to read and I love to learn as well. And so I'm a big reader, whether that's like, science fiction and fantasy I'm really into, and also into a lot of really like spiritual self-help books. And I do have a meditative practice that I do every day because that creates really big space in my head, that mental pause. I'm very easily distracted and I have a really hard time with focus. And so I have learned that that is essential. And I've learned to really like it. It's kind of like a hobby that I enjoy as well.
Well, I tell you, there are a million different ways to absorb knowledge and fulfillment, aren't there?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And Aaron, my final question for you today has to do with your own individual legacy. Because, I always, and when I talk to business people and ask them about their own professional and personal legacy, because I think it's important to have that perspective. So I'm curious when you look at yours, what comes to mind?
Yeah, I have been the person that builds stages, like figuratively for other people so that they can be the star. And I've never really wanted to be that for myself. I've always wanted to be kind of like an amplifier for other people who do want to make major impact. And so being able to help people learn business mechanics and also address the emotional toll it takes on a person to build a business, to help them jump through all the hoops that they have to, and whether that's mindset blocks or specific circumstances, but to help them really know that, having a business is achievable, it's available. So that's really what I want to leave behind is helping people pioneer their own path to creating their own thing, their own business, and have it be this thriving, sustainable piece that supports their whole entire life.
Fantastic. And tell me finally, if people want to get connected with you, what's the best way they can do that?
Yeah, so you can go to erin-riley.com. That's where my website is and where you can find all the information. But like I said earlier, I also co-host a podcast called I'm Excited Show for people who are really excited about an idea, but they don't really know how to get there, how to achieve it. It's a really fun podcast. It's just conversation that's really light and brings levity to all of the heavy things of building a business. So you can get in contact with me through that as well.
Well, I'm all about building levity in life. It's vitally important, isn't it?
I think so. And I'm so grateful that you're doing that through this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have to tell you, I thoroughly enjoyed our time together. I want to thank you for your work in the space of entrepreneurship and raising entrepreneurs to greater heights. And I want to thank you for engaging in conversation with me and being here this afternoon. It's most appreciated.
Oh, thank you. Likewise, I appreciate you so much.